Welcome one, welcome all to week 3 of the NFL season. As always, I am joined by Snyder. I am joined by Red Kachik. Hope you guys are doing well. Please do me a favor and hit that like button there on this video as well. That helps us out a ton. Snyder, how was last week for you? How are you doing this week? You know, we got 12 games to choose from. Should be a good one.
Yeah, it ended up being a pretty good week. I made a swap late Sunday in my cash team. I ended up playing Danny Dimes in cash. I played Danny Dimes and Godwin over Mahomes and Lazard. So I ended up working out good there. Tournament teams were kind of hit or miss. Nothing huge, nothing terrible there. But, yeah, excited to dive into this slate. We got a nice setup here. We got more afternoon games this week, which is going to set up great for a lot of swapping opportunities and a legit, good, fun afternoon slate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 5 afternoon games. So 5 games starting at 4 o'clock or later is actually really, really nice. Drew, how'd you do last week, and how amazing is this week for you? We got 1 game in the 50s.
Yeah. And we'll see how the injuries play out this week. Hasn't been great for the best ball teams. But, yeah, last week was pretty good, actually. I think the Seattle stack worked out really well. And I think the one piece kind of messed up with Tampa Bay is taking Evans over Godwin, which is going to happen, unfortunately, throughout the season. And then, the Arizona piece was, we talked through that of them being so low owned compared to the Rams. And that played out the opposite way that Vegas had anticipated. But it just didn't make sense the way the ownership was shaken out. And it worked out if you were able to stack up Harrison in that spot. So overall, yeah, honestly, a pretty good week, to be honest.
Yeah, it was very interesting too. I mean, the first thing that you brought up too, talking about the Rams Cardinals, was all the ownership was on the Rams, and it ended up being the Cardinals that ended up bashing. And that's a really good leverage point too. And especially when you're trying to win $1 million, that helps out a lot. So I think in week 2, Snyder, you mentioned it with Daniel Jones, right? You had him in your cash team stuff. He was actually in the winning team, the Millie Maker team last week as well, with Malik Neighbors. Marvin Harrison Jr. got there in the winner as well. I mean, there was a lot of stuff where I feel like we were circling on, especially Neighbors. I think, him going off there, I think that's the last time we're going to see him priced that low in a nut matchup like that. So that'll be fun to watch. Look at this. We even get AP in the chat saying hello. We got King of Smack. How's it going? Paulina Boats. Boats. Poland, I guess, would be the real one. And then Brad Moore, Richie Smalls. Glad to see the like is smashed. All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and dive into the slate head first. And the reason why is because we're going to be using SaberSim. If you do want to follow along, we're using the SaberSim select games at the top of the screen. And the first one is actually very important. We get the news of Joe Mixon going to probably miss out, or he is ruled out for this game here. So what that does is it probably brings in a very, very chalky option at the running back position at 4,700 in Cam Akers. And then on the Minnesota Vikings side of the ball, a popular run back might even be a run back. Who knows? It could just be a separate piece. But the Aaron Jones at 14%. So those are the 2 guys projected for double-digit ownership. Snyder, I'm going to give it to you here first. With Joe Mixon out, are you buying the Cam Akers stock this week?
I don't think so. I think I'm going to be off him. I think on FanDuel, if you're going to play him over there, he's minimum price over there. So he's definitely more in play over there. But I think I'm just going to be under on him. There's another guy later that we'll get into that's priced relatively the same as him. His prop is 14 yards less. I think he's going to outscore him. So I'm probably going to be off of Cam Akers. It looks like some of the cash optimals I'm looking at also are kind of getting off him as well, mainly going with the other 3 running backs instead. So I think, I'll be off of him. The Vikings have been decent against the run. I mean, they haven't really gotten killed by it or anything, and it's tough to come back from the injuries Akers has. I do like some of the passing options, though, on the Houston side. I'm going to be buying some of that Tank Dell, the dip in him. I like him at 5.2 this week. I like a lot of those mid-range receivers this week. I think Tank Dell at 5.2 is a great option this week. I look for him to kind of get going here. Really didn't have – last week was just a horrible game script, low-scoring game. There was only 30 points scored in that game. This is a much better game. I do kind of like the Vikings in this spot, though, even to win this game potentially. There's a a lot of sharp money is starting to come in on the Vikings. That spread is really down to almost a pick 'em, almost even there. The Vikings have a really good coaching staff. The Flores too. I really like the Vikings defense. That's one. I think on my last week I punted with the Falcons defense down there. I think this week I'm gonna be very, very heavy on the Minnesota defense here. I mean, they get after the quarterback. They've had multiple interceptions this year already. One last game and 2 the game before. I think they have 11 or 12 total sacks on the year as well. I think they're going to cause some problems here. They're well coached. They're going to keep them in the game. So really high on the Minnesota defense. Tank Dell. And then I think you can go to Jordan Jefferson. I ran the Sims. I ran the contest Sims for the Million Maker and sorted it by the risk-adjusted ROI. And the first team that popped up, the highest team, was a Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson team. So I think there's some validity to that. So I think Justin Jefferson is a guy that'll be pretty low owned here, 8,600. He's had a touchdown in each of the last 2 games, 4 catches last week, 133 yards. He had the big play there. We know that big play threat is there for him every week. So I think there's some solid options to look for in this game.
Yeah, especially when you break it down too. Tank Dell's a good shout. I mean, he dropped that big play that could have been a touchdown, I think, in that game against the Bears there, where it just hit him in the hands and he could have kept running. He still would be running right now. So I do like that as a little bit of I wouldn't say it's like leverage or anything like that, but it's a great price at 5,200. This is probably the lowest price you'll see Tank Dell unless he continues to be this bad. But I do think he is going to rebound quite a bit. Drew, Justin Jefferson had the injury scare last week, but I think a lot of people are going to be able to spend up at wide receiver, just judging by the slate right now. You're going to have the salary. Is Justin Jefferson a guy you're looking at here? 8,600, decent projection, but he's going to come in around, I would say around 10% ownership. Yeah.
Yeah, not for me.
Really?
I gotta look at who's behind center, and I'm still not a Darnold guy. So
yeah.
I struggle. I mean, honestly, if I'm going to spend $9K, I want the Tyreek Hill type upside. And Justin Jefferson did have that last year. I don't know if he'll see that a lot this year. So it remains to be seen. But for me, I'm going to wait. I don't feel like I'm missing out at the price. It's not like a 7,600 or 6,600, and you really got to just jump ahead and grab it with the value. But you're looking for you're looking for a serious ceiling game. And I just don't know. I mean, the spread here is pretty tight. The total looks good, but I'm leaning the Houston side for sure. So I'm with Snyder with Tank Dell. I'm going to keep playing CJ Stroud. I think his rushing upside is good. I think the actual offensive weapons he has are incredibly strong for him to get a couple passing TDs and a rushing TD. So I like the Houston side for a stack for sure. Cam Akers I still think is fine at 4,700. I'm a little bit not different than Snyder. I do think he's a stronger play at that price. And honestly, I liked him even when Mixon was in a couple weeks ago. I guess maybe week 1 on Thursday. So I have no issue with stacking up the Houston side pretty heavy, to be honest. And then we'll see. I don't know if I'm going to get much of Minnesota. I have a little bit of, let's see. I got a little bit of Aaron Jones with Vikings D. So I guess that's a game script. You would just take the Vikings winning. And the defense was strong with some turnovers, and you play Aaron Jones with the defense for the Vikings. But otherwise, I think I'm just going to stick with Houston, guys. I really do think the Houston offense is going to be saying Miami Dolphins last year is probably a little bit strong, but I do think there's some serious fireworks that these guys can pop off every single week. One of them with CJ Stroud's running upside, it's pretty strong.
Yeah, no.
I did mess up on one guy. There was a deal on the chat here about Jalen Naylor. I did mention him last week as a guy I thought that they would look to in the red zone. He got 2 red zone targets last week again, and it did find the end zone again. I think he's fine there at 4,400 as well as a cheap kind of a dart throw there as well.
Yeah, Jalen Naylor, what is he priced at here today? 4,400, right? So that's not the worst. I mean, the biggest thing too. What did we see from the Texans in week 1, especially, right? They gave up the big play. And this is something where if you do think this is going to be close, I do think it's okay to buy stock in Justin Jefferson. But also on the flip side, these 2 teams are actually in the bottom 6 in the league in terms of targets going out wide. So basically yardage given to wide receivers that lined up in a wide alignment. That's going to kind of fall into the hands of guys like Justin Jefferson, a guy like Nico Collins. So I don't want to forget the passing game here, even though the running game is going to command almost 35, I would say 40% combined ownership with Jones and Nico. I do think the leverage there could be to just kind of attack these passing games. It is going to be a bit of an interesting one. I would say in Akers' case, right, we don't exactly know what the plan is too in that backfield.
Yeah.
There is not a guarantee that Akers is just going to waltz into 60, 70% of the snaps, right? Because you still got Ogunbowale in there too, who's going to command probably a bunch of the passing work. There's a decent chance that Akers is great value. He could score, but he might not have the winning upside. Like, what, 60 yards and no touchdowns, a bust. 60 yards and a touchdown is mediocre at 4,700. And if he's not going to get involvement in the passing game, like, I don't think he's going to have a huge role. I think Ogunbowale is going to have a much larger role. I'm also out on Akers here too, so I think that's going to be a little bit of the go-to here. Sorry. All right, we're going to move on to the New York Giants and the Cleveland Browns. It's a great game. Malik Neighbors, 11% ownership projection right now. It's the highest in this game. The Browns defense, and very interestingly, a good pivot. I even saw this in the chat earlier too. Dante Foreman, 4,400 here. So at 4,400, Dante Foreman actually out-touched Jerome Ford. I think he got the first touch of the game last week too. So it wasn't like Ford just, got out-snapped or, I think he had a slight injury scare or whatever. Now, Foreman might just be the main guy there right now. It is kind of crazy to me. Drew, how are you approaching this Browns backfield and then Malik Neighbors as well?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I guess, Ford's been the guy that I've been clicking, but like Foreman definitely looks like he's going to take some share of that. And the price obviously is a little bit more appealing. So it'll probably be a mixed bag. I don't know if I can take a side and just stand there, but I'll probably have a mix of both. So like Foreman, I have a little bit more ownership on right now, right around 12%, and then Ford's right around 8%. So it's it's relatively close to an even split as far as exposures go. But overall, I don't love this game. Obviously, the Giants, I'm not sure we're going to see Danny Dimes go for a back-to-back Millie Maker winning lineup. So I'll probably just play the Cleveland Browns. The defense is a little bit expensive, but it does look like the upside is there, especially if the spread is that strong for Cleveland. And then you obviously want the rushing, not run back, but the rushing correlation with the defense. So for me, I'll probably play Foreman with Browns, or I'll play Ford with Browns. Otherwise, honestly, guys, they're even the lower owned guys here. I don't know if there's enough upside. There's enough bigger scoring games that I don't think I can really bite into too much here.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you look at it, there's just a whole lot of just gross clicks, right? It's gross to click on Elijah Moore. I think Dante Foreman, it's reasonable if you pair him up with the Browns defense. I could see you're getting just over 8K, running back defense stack. I don't know, Snyder. It's close to a cross off for me. It's not quite there. I don't want to go against the Browns in Cleveland, but I think you can go against the Giants on the road. And Cleveland, people are expecting them to still do something. Do you have more interest in them over the Giants?
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is a great transition from that Houston game because there's a running back in there that's priced right at where Akers is going against this bad Giants rush defense. This Giants rush defense gave up many games, 20 to 30 DK points last year, and already this year they gave up 29 DK points last week to the Washington backfield and then 26 DK points to the Minnesota backfield in week one. I really like Deontay Foreman here at 4,400, 1,400 off of Ford. I'm seeing Foreman I've got him right around 5% or less, I think, in large and small field stuff. So I'm going to be at least 4X the field, I think, on Foreman. I'll probably have him probably 20 to 30%, I think. His prop is only 14 yards less than Akers as well, so he's got good props. I think he's going to be kind of the bell cow there. They're just going to move him in there a little bit more. I expect him to get probably around 15 touches, probably 13 to 17 carries, and then he had a catch last week, so maybe he has a 1 or 2 catches again this week. So I think the opportunity for him to score 15 to 20 is relatively pretty high. I think it's way higher than Akers too. So I'm going to be high on Deontay Foreman. I put in chat, that was my bold take in Discord, that I thought Foreman would outscore Akers this week. So that's kind of where I'm going. That's my main leverage play on that. The 35% Akers for the 5% guys. So I like that. I think the Browns are fine if you can afford them. I mean, the Browns D and Deontay Foreman stack is pretty cheap. I know that Browns defense is up there. I usually don't like spending up for defenses like that. I usually like to punt it off since it's such a higher variant position. But that's my main thing. Otherwise, it's kind of a cross-off for me in this game. I'm not going to go back to Neighbors this week. I don't like the spot for him. I think you could maybe go to Jordan Akins if you want. The Browns tight end there at 3K flat. Tight end's just been such a wasteland through the 2 weeks. You could go there if you want. He only has 4 catches on the year, but I think I may just jam another guy later in another game for tight end, but mainly just Foreman and possibly the Browns defense.
Yeah, it's a good point too when you just talk about what the fantasy points allowed to the backfield. The Giants have had. They've also given up the 5th most rushing yards this year too. So I do like this as a leverage off of. I wouldn't say leverage is the wrong term. A pivot off of Cam Akers. You get a little extra 300 in savings, a very similar projection to, I think it's a couple points. But like you said, the only difference is their yardage props are 14 yards off. I bet their anytime touchdown props are the same stuff. And that's how the Vegas sees it. But I also kind of see it very similar. And it's a better spot, like you were mentioning. I'm all aboard the Foreman train with you. All right. Bears, Colts. Is Caleb Williams a bust? Snyder?
Caleb Williams bust. We're gonna need to see a few more games before I would say that. But
yes, you can say yes.
It's definitely not trending the best way for Caleb Williams, but it's been bad early for him. I don't see much I like in this game. This is kind of a cross-off game for me. You could potentially go to Rome if you want. He's got 9 targets through the first 2 games. He only caught 3 of them, though. I just really don't want to target this game at all. It's a low total. It's a 1-point game. I think this is going to be a pretty slow slog game. I think the Colts do have a pretty good advantage offensive line versus defensive line. If you wanted to go the Jonathan Taylor at 7-3, I just prefer the other backs to him. So I'm just going to be off of this game as a whole, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. And real quick, I was just about to look at props real fast, but Maiden Focus comes in with a very sharp take. I was just doing some stuff where Vela's in the slot and stuff. I'm hitting that prop. And here's the prop. Lined at 2.5 catches plus 140. I'll be joining you hand in hand, Maiden Focus. I like that. But this is one of the lowest owned games that you'll see on a game with a decent total. I mean, right? It's not a terrible total on this slate. There's some games under 40 that are gross. But there isn't a single guy projected for more than 7% ownership. I mean, maybe the defenses get there. 2,600 for the Bears D against Anthony Richardson, who made the Packers defense look incredible last week. I mean, that could be something. But other than that, it's no one, Drew. I mean, are you kind of in the same boat where it's a little bit of a cross-off? Because what did we see from the Colts last week, taking Jonathan Taylor out almost the entire 4th quarter, despite him crushing on the ground? It's frustrating.
Yeah, the only strong take I have here. So I see people don't love calling someone a bust 2 games in, but I will say a lot of the responsibility for him just completely sucking last week was the offensive line just let everybody in. So if anything, I want to play the Indianapolis Colts defense. That's what I want to take. So 3,200 for them, get a couple sacks. I actually like that quite a bit. I mean, honestly, it's a showdown. So we got to see every single play of that. It wasn't just a game on a 11-game slate. And you just see the result at the end. Every single offensive snap, he was getting blitzed. And he was just getting completely wrecked. So I'm going to put the blame on the offensive line a little bit. And for that, I'm going to take the Colts defense. But overall, yeah, the point total here looks appealing. I mean, it's not terrible. Both are around 22 points for their Vegas score. So to be honest, the best plays in this game are just one-off wide receiver upside. So DJ Moore is the only guy from the Chicago side that I like. And then Jonathan Taylor, which you just talked about, but he's the only one that could have maybe rushing TD upside at his price. So besides that, man, I think it's just the Colts defense. And I think I honestly don't even think they're that popular. It's 2% owned. So I think 3,200 for Colts against that Chicago offensive line. Sign me up.
Yeah, I don't mind either defense in this one because both
That's
young
true.
quarterbacks, both can make mistakes. We've seen it with Anthony Richardson. You saw it with Caleb Williams last week. Both great individual talents. I mean, I was kind of tongue in cheek about the bust, but like both can easily make a mistake, and this other defense can really make them pay. You look at some of the stats too, just Colts wise. I mean, they didn't really have a chance to pressure Malik Willis much because I think Josh Jacobs had just a billion carries last week, and that's what the game plan was. But I wonder if you're going to see something similar. The problem is, I don't know what Eberflus is doing. And it's really one of the most frustrating teams, like Waldron and Eberflus right now. I don't feel like they're putting Caleb in a great position either to succeed at this moment. So I'm very wait and see on this Bears team. One big, piece of news: Keenan Allen. If he's out, right, I have much more interest in a guy like Odunze, who wasn't it his dad was posting him clips of Rome Odunze being wide open in the end zone and Caleb not throwing the ball. That's aggressive. I mean, that's something. And then also big news too that I don't want to go overlook. Josh Downs is back. Not like for fantasy impact, but there's going to be a lot of people, and I don't a lot, but like I think Alec Pierce is like someone who's just going to get some clicks because look at how much he's averaging per game. But Josh Downs is back, and I'm very curious to see how that affects this wide receiver room. I mean, we saw Ashton Doolin catch a touchdown in week 1, but this Colts wide receiver room, AD Mitchell's a stud and stuff, could look a little bit complicated beyond Michael Pittman. I don't really want to fiddle with anyone there except Jonathan Taylor. And then obviously for the Bears with Keenan Allen, status, what is it? It's still quite doubtful, right? Is that the last I saw? Or is he in or out? He is out. So he is out. So yeah, I have some interest in Odunze and especially DJ Moore then. All right, let's go ahead and dive into our next game. And it might not be, but it could be a Malik Willis revenge game. Actually, he had the best answer I've heard about. Do you have any like resentment or whatever toward the Titans? He's like, nah, I got paid my whole time there. Like, what a great attitude to have. That made me such a big fan of Malik Willis. It's like, I'll say this: we get a Josh Jacobs 6,700, 20% ownership, and that's if Malik Willis is the starter again. There's a chance that Jordan Love does play for what it's worth. He was practicing. He did get some practices in. Definitely not 100%, but I'm wondering if, Malik Willis is in, are we just going to see 50 billion carries again for Josh Jacobs? And then are you going to have interest in that? And Drew, I'll lead off with you. Are you eating the 20% chalk if Malik Willis is the quarterback for Josh Jacobs?
I probably will some, yeah. Overall, though, I think this game's going to be pretty slow. Like Tennessee tends to play slow anyways. Green Bay, I mean, just every single game it seems like they're going under. So, I got a little bit of exposure to Josh Jacobs from Green Bay's side. As far as like Tennessee, I do think, I think in week 1, Snyder talked about Will Levis and the upside there. And there is some passing upside, I think, with Calvin Ridley there, Tony Pollard coming from Dallas. I think there's actually some upside from Tennessee side. But generally speaking, I'm definitely lower on this game. Josh Jacobs, though, yeah, I mean, he's going to be projected for 20-25% owned. And I'll probably be right at the field for that. I don't have a problem at the price. And it's really just kind of game script specific. But I will say, like, I don't think I'm going to love stacking up this game or having a ton of exposure anyways. I won't sweat it either way. But I will say I think some Levis exposure with some Calvin Ridley makes a lot of sense. And you could throw in Pollard in some of those stacks as well. But I do think at the price, 5,200 for Will Levis, there's still some upside there if the game script gets a little bit quicker.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we see some Tony Pollard buzz in the chat here. This is going to be a little bit interesting about. I think Pollard looks really good, Snyder. Whenever you see like a Titans highlight, you're like, damn, Pollard does not look like last year. He looks 10 times better than last year. I think that injury really held him back. I really regret not getting a ton of it in best ball. But you had Tyjae Spears banged up a little bit last week. It's still going to be as much of a 50-50 split. It always feels like. I think that's the plan with both the running backs. But Pollard is expected to get some double-digit ownership, along with the Titans' defense at 2,700 is also expected to be pretty, maybe the highest owned defense in that range. It looks, I would say 17% is incredibly high for a defense. And then everyone else is below 1%, which makes sense, right? Like, it makes perfect sense. I think Calvin Ridley would be the only one that I would have any real interest in. But Snyder, tell me a little bit about Tony Pollard. A lot of people in the chat mentioned him.
Yeah, I think he's going to see some ownership this week. With the pass game usage, I think he's a pretty safe option to get, 12 to 15 points or so. Last week he had 15. The week before he had 18. He's probably going to see around 15 carries again. That's where he's been. He's been seeing some good work in the pass game as well. He's got 8 catches on the year, caught 5 last week. So I think he's a pretty safe guy to get 12 to 15. I just don't know if he's got the upside in this kind of game script and game flow. I think this is going to be a really, really slow game. We've got a total right around 37 in this game. I think the Packers are once again going to try and just take the air out of the game here. Last week we saw Josh Jacobs get 32 carries. I think he was my play of the day last week on here. Almost had a big game. Ended up only scoring 17 points, but had 32 carries for 151 yards. Just couldn't find the end zone, which leaves that game pretty bleak there for him from a DK scoring standpoint. But I think he's fine if you want to go there. I'd just rather play some of these other running backs this week. I think it's just a little too thin to go to Jacobs here. I think this game's probably going to play to maybe 17-20 at the most. That's at 37 points right there. I think that's the ceiling of this game. I think it could be 13-10 or something as well. So going to be kind of off of this game as a whole. But I think either of these running backs are fine options if you want to go there. At the wide receiver spot, I just don't see much there. I don't think that Green Bay is really going to give much of an option to throw there. And, yeah, I think it's just going to play slow.
I agree. I can go ahead and move on from this one to an even better game, Snyder. The Chargers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Justin Herbert is probably going to play. I'm assuming he is going to play. They're going to run the ball. I might have been wrong on that one coming into the season, but they're definitely going to try and pound the ball a little bit. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense has not been a joke at all. I mean, they made the Falcons look silly in week 1, and then they had the Broncos in week 2, but the Steelers defense is legit, and anytime you're going into Pittsburgh, you're not going to have a good time. As a Bengals fan, that is the main thing. However, you have 2 guys, wide receivers, projecting for above 5% ownership. Everyone else is below that mark. Even the amazing J.K. Dobbins is somehow below that mark. I feel like he is going to get ownership until he busts, though. I don't think he's going to be sub 1%. I think that'll be closer to 5%. But George Pickens and Ladd McConkey are the only ones projected for above 5% ownership. You have the Steelers defense at 3,300. Like I said, I expect Herbert to be in, but if he wasn't for any reason, we could expect that Steelers defense to be super chalky. Snyder, anything I'm seeing or you're seeing that I'm not?
I think this game's going to be 3-0, and I want nothing to do with this game.
I was going to say, the only guy you could probably sell me on, and that McConkey and Pickens would be they're okay.
Yeah.
Justin Fields at 5,400, maybe, right? We're kind of getting to the point where quarterbacks are, now getting priced appropriately. I think the first 2 weeks you kind of had some mispriced and stuff, but Fields always has the potential, right?
Yeah, he's going to pop too. I think Fields is going to see some ownership in this game. He's kind of been the guy I've heard on some podcasts and stuff on VSiN and such I've been listening to this week. Kind of a sneaky guy that people think. There's some talk about people on VSiN taking his rushing prop over this week. So I think there's some interesting validity to that potentially at 5,400.
Yeah, that's going to be probably the only off the wall play that I feel like can really be a true winner here. Drew, anything you want to add to this game?
Yeah, the only guy that I would throw out there as a one-off for the Millie Maker is Quentin Johnston.
There we go. It took till week 3, but you're there.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit of recency bias, but 4,600 for a guy. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions last week, 2 TDs. I mean, it's likely they don't even see 2 TDs, but if I can get some workload and maybe he gets a touchdown and 75 yards or something, it'd be pretty good at 4,600. So that'd be the only play. Otherwise, yeah, I would put in my voucher for a skip here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Quentin Johnston did look pretty good last week, making some big plays. Who knows if that is going to be the case moving forward? But I will gladly welcome that. So let's go ahead and get into the Broncos and the Buccaneers. And like was it Maiden Focus said, I'm hammering the Vela props. That was one of my favorite things. I did an article on the slots earlier this week. Vela was the king of it in week 1. They were all really low A-dot targets, and that is something that, I will be betting here very, very shortly. Hopefully it doesn't move too much. But for this game, Chris Godwin since moving back into the slot, like last year, I think he was around felt like 40% of his snaps were from the slot. This year, it's around 65% of his routes from the slot or something like that. This is interesting because he looks really good. He made some big plays against Detroit last week. The Buccaneers defense, 14% projected ownership, 3K against Bo Nix on the road. These all make sense. And then on the flip side, the Broncos, Sean Payton's sitting there like, we gotta examine what we were asking people to do or who we were asking to do it. So you're the coach, dude. Like, what are we doing? He also said he wants to get Jaleel McLaughlin more touches, so that hurts like Javonte Williams in my mind. You had Greg Dulcich actually get, was it 5 targets last week or 8 targets last week, I think, at a punt position at tight end. We haven't talked about tight ends really at all. I know the latter half of the games are really interesting and going to soak up a ton of the ownership. But this game feels like it could have a couple pieces. Like, I wouldn't say a couple, maybe one piece in a main team, Drew.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So if I gave you 8 targets and you scored 4 DraftKings points, I wouldn't be giving you 8 targets the next week. Just FYI. But
if you were my quarterback, I could blame you.
You could. It could be my fault. I didn't really do the data on how bad those 8 targets were. It could be not in the vicinity. But yeah, I think honestly it seems pretty lopsided from Tampa Bay's perspective. I think it's really just trying to get which receiver is going to go off. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin's prices come in pretty close to each other. Godwin's going to be quite a lot more owned than Mike Evans. So for me, that would be leaning into Mike Evans a bit more. I got that wrong last week, and I'll martingale Mike Evans this week. But honestly, anything from Tampa Bay honestly feels pretty good. I don't think the tight ends from Tampa Bay, like Cade Otton, just doesn't have the upside. It seems like it's going to be Rachaad White with some like goal line TDs, or it's going to be through the air, and you're going to get a big game from Evans or Godwin, and then you want Baker Mayfield at 6,300. So that's really like the stand for me. I think the run back would be probably Josh Reynolds, I think, for price savings, but Cortland Sutton's okay as well. But it's really those two and then just stacking up Tampa Bay. I think this is honestly a pretty good spot. And the prices are still really good. I mean, if you think about Godwin's upside versus like we talked about Justin Jefferson for 2,100 more, like it's honestly pretty close in the right game script. So, yeah, I think Tampa Bay, I'm going to lean Evans over Godwin just because of ownership. But any way you want to stack up this Tampa Bay side, I think is a pretty good spot.
Perfect. Did Vita Vea? He's out for this one, which is pretty significant because the Bucs are one of the strongest pass funnels too. At least they are when Vita Vea is in. However, him being out kind of impacts the thing too, where the Lions had 55 pass attempts last week, and that wasn't no accident, right? That was obviously a trail script and stuff, but you do want to attack the Bucs through the air. Does Vita Vea being out for you, Snyder, change anything?
I really don't want much to do with this Denver side. Last week, Sean Payton, with some of the stuff he was doing there, didn't even try kind of towards the end of that game. It was kind of interesting how that game kind of transpired down the stretch. I do think Tampa Bay there's a couple good options here. I've been playing Godwin every week. I'll go back to Godwin. I think he's probably going to see 6 to 8 catches again this week, probably around 75 to 120 yards receiving. Found the end zone 2 times this year, once each game. Pretty good chance of that happening again. I think Tampa kind of has their way with them here. 6.5 point home spread. The total is a little low, but I think that's more so on the Denver side. So I'm going to be still playing Godwin at 6,500. I think he's one of the safer options from the wide receiver position this week. One of the top 5 to 7 guys, safety floor wise, and he's still got the ceiling, like Drew was saying. He's got 25, 30 point upside there too. So I'll be heavy on Godwin. I think Rachaad White is fine for tournaments. He should be under 10%. He's got good pass game work as well. And then if you want to go to Bucky Irvin, I think that's kind of thin, but it makes for a decent milli play there at 5.1K if you want to.
Yeah, Bucky Irving was getting some buzz earlier in the week when Rachaad White was kind of battling an injury, but no injury designation for him going into this game. But there will be a point in time where I feel like Bucky Irving will be a major point of chalk piece, I imagine, if Rachaad White gets banged up at any point during the year. All right, now this is the best team in the NFL. The New Orleans Saints take on the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, so you throw out week 1, right? Hey, they were playing the Panthers, right? You know, they killed the Panthers, but look, it's the Panthers. Then they do it in week 2 to the Cowboys. Sure enough, they got me thinking that they're legit. And it looks like the field is also buying in on Alvin Kamara potentially being the top dog in the NFL in terms of running backs go. Like 7,500 for him. And the biggest thing that you're getting from Kamara, he looks like he's the Kamara of old. He's also getting involvement in the passing game. The Taysom Hill truthers are not happy right now because he is not involved in the goal line at all. He's the most chalk running back, I would say, in terms of most chalk stud running back, I should say, at 34% ownership. Devontae Smith around 25% without A.J. Brown, and that's a good price, 6,900. Dallas Goedert, after a dud on prime time last week, he is also projected for 11%. Chris Olave as well. So you want to attack this Philadelphia secondary quite a bit, and Olave getting some ownership. I do think that's pretty sharp. Let's see here. I'm going to go to you, Drew, to start out on this one because there's a lot of good pieces. I think we're going to have plenty of time to touch them all after the past few games where we didn't really talk much.
Yeah, I think Kamara's tough as far as the ownership. Like, it really depends on what kind of lineups you're building around Kamara. 35% owned, you're going to be playing against 70,000 other entries with Kamara starting in the $20 milli maker. So it's just a big chunk you have to eat up. And then honestly, you can do it. You just have to get different. You can't eat too much other chalk. It's a big pool of lineups you're going against. But I do think Olave at 11% makes a lot of sense. Derek Carr is still pretty cheap. Like, Kamara's been having big games, but so has Derek Carr. And you could throw in Olave, who hasn't had the big boom week yet. We talked about him a little bit last week. I think Olave makes sense. Shahid's a little bit expensive, but honestly, you could do a triple stack if you want to fade Kamara in this spot. You play Kamara, or you play Carr, Olave, and Shahid. So I think you would go there. Sorry if I butchered Shahid's name, Rubio.
A lot of emphasis on the Shah, huh?
Shahid.
Yeah, you had it.
Well, you're looking at Rashid and you see Heed at the end. It's just a lot of Eads in there. But
it's got a lot of Heeds.
Honestly, this is a fantastic game. I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. And then to me personally, I think it makes it really easy when you look at a spot like Devontae Smith on Philadelphia's side. He's going to be 25% owned, and I think that is a much safer chalk, honestly, than Kamara, or at least more upside, I guess, at the price than Kamara. So Devontae Smith with A.J. Brown out, I think 6,900 for him is pretty strong. Saquon Barkley's a little bit expensive. I mean, how about that? Saquon Barkley's more expensive than Kamara here. But, I think I want to stay – I think the stacking side is more prominent from New Orleans because of the price of Carr specifically. And Olave is fine. But, like, from Philadelphia, it's just, like, one-off pieces. Like, I think Devontae Smith's probably the guy. You could probably take – if you need to fill a tight end spot, you take Dallas Goedert. But I think overall this game is fantastic. Strategically, I'm going to play New Orleans stacks with run backs with Devontae Smith. And Devontae Smith can be a one-off in almost every one of my lineups, honestly, and I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, perfect. I'm glad you brought up Shahid. Like what he's done through 2 weeks has been incredible. Snyder, what are your thoughts on this game? I mean, this looks like it's one of the best options. Indoors, everything, a total near 50. Yeah, this is a good one, right?
Yeah, this is my favorite game to target. I think I've seen a lot of cash games with multiple pieces from this game as well. I'm seeing a lot of cash teams with Kamara, Olave, and then Devonta Smith. I think those three. I think Olave and Godwin are really, really close to each other, like a coin flip. Whether you're going to play either or in that cash spot, basically the same price tag there. I'm going to look to stack this game up a lot of different ways. So with Kamara there, he's averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Philly versus zone this year is allowing 7.4 yards per run, and New Orleans is running zone runs on 70% of their runs. So I think that sets up really well for Kamara with the added pass game as well. So I'm going to be high on Kamara. I think a way to kind of get different playing Kamara will be to play him with Derek Carr also. I think you can play those two. That'll be kind of unique. I think playing Kamara and Barkley together will be really unique as well. I think Barkley will be under 10%. I think Barkley's in a great spot here as well. So I'm going to go with some Barkley as well. 7,700, 200 more than Kamara. I think Barkley will probably be maybe a third the ownership of Barkley or a Kamara, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think both of them are great plays. I really like Carr. I'm looking at playing Carr in cash even potentially. He's one of the guys I'm looking at. If I'm looking to spend down, it's going to be Carr. If I'm looking to spend up, it's going to be Hurts. I think Hurts and it's going to be really popular. Probably the most popular quarterback, I think, on the slate. He's got so much ways that he can beat you with Devonta there. His rushing upside. The QB sneak is back. The tush push is back. They ran it. I don't know why they didn't run it last week a couple of times to get that first down, but I think he's fine. 7,300. Like the overall quarterback pricing is coming down though. 7,300 for Hurts. Looking back on his last year's pricing, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times I'm just seeing off the first look that he's priced over 8K last year. So I think we're getting good value on Hurts relative to his last year's price as well. And then Rashid Shaheed, he's actually being used in shorter routes as well. They're using him in those deeper routes, but if you take away his 2 highest ADOT passes, his ADOT is right around 8 to 9 yards. So they're giving him some slant routes, some more shorter work as well. And I think you could punt with Covey as well if you wanted to get really unique. He caught all 6 of his targets last week. Didn't do much with it, but if he gets 6 more targets and 6 more catches this week, I would take the over on the 23 yards of what he got last week. So I think he's interesting to get different in this game as well at 3,200.
Can I give you 2 points real quick?
What's that?
So if you had 2 lineups in the Millie Maker, the $20 Millie Maker. First lineup, obviously, build a good lineup. But the second lineup, I don't hate playing the Philadelphia defense. Play some Carr regression, some interceptions. Play some stacks of Carr. And then play some defense of the Eagles. Just saying. One of these weeks, he's going to bust. And honestly, like 2,600 for like the Eagles defense is pretty good. I think it's just a pricing thing off of New Orleans having 2 good weeks, and you never know. But I do like the New Orleans side, like we talked about. But I do think there's an interesting spot when you start playing the defense against Carr. One of these weeks, dude, 2,600 or 2,400 for a defense against him. It's gonna be the gravy train.
So fun stuff here with NFL Pro. The Saints don't run a lot of guys with slot alignment because they haven't had to. Because when you're up by 50 against the Panthers and up by 40 against Cowboys, you don't need to have a bunch of guys out there, when you're just running the ball in the second half. But Shaheed does have the most slot targets with 5. Olave is second with 2. They've only ran a combined 18 routes in the slot for Shaheed and Olave. Then there's some other players in there as well. But the Eagles, through 2 weeks, have been absolutely horrendous against the slot. One of those was a huge play to Jaden Reed in week 1. So that could play into a guy like Rashid Shaheed's hands, who's already been incredible with the deep ball this season. So let's move on to the new look Carolina Panthers. And as a Bengals fan, Andy Dalton, warming my heart. He's still in the league. And I guess I just underestimated how bad Bryce Young was in the second half of last season and how little he improved, and he actually regressed. He did not improve. I think the Panthers are still going to be competitive. This is like the most if they get blown out this week, I'm just chasing a dragon that'll never come at this point. But it's the martingale system, like you mentioned earlier, Drew. Just going to keep martingaling the Panthers until I'm just broke. But I'm not saying that you ever want to target guys in a game against the Las Vegas Raiders, despite them throwing the ball a ton last week against the Ravens. I think that's a little bit against what they're going to do for the season. If they prove me wrong this week, that makes sense. But this Panthers defense also has just been really, just lack of a better word, buns against the pass, against the run. They lost the best player in week 1. I don't have a ton of, I wouldn't say promise in their defense, right? I think the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be able to hit them on the ground. And Brock Bowers, you talk about a guy who actually already looks like the best tight end in the league. He really looks like the real deal. And he's splitting up in the slot. He's splitting up out wide. He is doing so much here. He is projected for 16% ownership. Zamir White, 13. Devontae Adams, 12. Snyder, after the Panthers have gotten blown out in back-to-back games, I know that they're changing the quarterback. This defense is still tough to watch, right? You got to have some interest in the Raiders, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple good options here in the Raiders. you look at what Carolina plays defensively wise, they play a single high safety at 73% of the time. And who beats that? Devonta Adams just crushes on single high safeties. He's got a 48% target share versus that and a 65% air yard market share there as well. I think Devonta Adams is gonna crush here. We saw what he did last week to my Ravens, and now he gets a home matchup versus a pretty easy matchup here. I think he's the guy that could go for 30 plus in this game. Last year we saw him go for 40 once. Potentially, he could be knocking on that door again this week. I think he's a solid option there at 7,600. I like him. And then Brock Bowers, I played him last week. He's been pretty good so far against that same defense as well. I think he's a fine option. He might be the more popular option that tight end. But 5,400, I think he's fine. You can fit him in relatively easy with all the value we got. And I'm looking at his ownership. Yeah, he's going to see probably around 15% ownership, I think, or so. But those two are my favorites. I don't mind some Adam Thielen at 5K. If I was going to go to a Panther, it would probably be Adam Thielen. We saw him have some success early in the year last year before he got old, tired, and broken down midway the end of the year. But he had some good games at the start of the year last year. Finally gets a confident quarterback. You can see him running some of those routes through the first two games. He just runs it, looks back, and he just shakes his head. Actually has a confident guy throwing him the ball now. So I think Thielen is fine. I prefer him. And that's about it for me there. I think Devonta Adams is a smash. I think some people are going to go to the running backs here for the Raiders. And that's fine. I don't have too much conviction on those two. I'd rather play the other guys, I think, this week.
Yeah, with Zamir White and Madison, you're going to have a little bit of a split. I do think at some point in this season, if it does stay this bad, Adam Thielen is going to be a guy who's going to be on the trading block a little bit. I think for a veteran team that might need a wide receiver, good chance to kind of hype him up, sell. Look at this. Yeah, look at this used Maserati that we got in Adam Thielen. Sure enough, just get rid of it. But yeah, I do like that. I think he had a huge game with Dalton last year, right, against the Seahawks.
I think he won the Million Maker last year, maybe.
Yeah. Yep, I think he was in that winner, and Dalton absolutely crushed. Drew, I look at the Panthers side. Deontay Johnson and Thielen both should, in theory, get bumps because they're getting way better quarterback play. And Canales should have a decent system on getting on the rock. We're through 2 weeks. Can we just throw out everything we know about the Panthers and just say start fresh and maybe go a wide receiver number 1 or a wide receiver number 2 in Thielen and Deontay Johnson for under 5K?
Probably, yeah. Honestly, when a veteran QB and a new QB in the same year come back, honestly, it's probably a good spot to reset the slate. So I don't hate that. It's Adam Thielen. Honestly, if Andy Dalton's coming in, if I was Andy Dalton, Adam Thielen would be a reliable target. And like you said, they might be boosting him up a little bit. So I don't hate that as like a one-off flyer. Deontay Johnson's fine at 4,900 as well. It would just be, I don't think I can stack up Dalton, but I definitely would take some pieces. I don't hate it. It would just be pretty minimal exposure. Now I will say, as far as one-offs go, I think Las Vegas is like littered with them, to be honest. Honestly, all of the volume that the receivers have been getting, Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, it's been insane. 8-9 targets for Brock Bowers, 6 and then 12 targets for Devontae Adams. They're both pretty reasonably priced, and Gardner Minshew's not throwing touchdowns. So it's all volume with targets and yards. So I think Brock Bowers is a pretty safe tight end play. And I think Devontae Adams at his price is still a really good upside play. If he's going to get 10 targets possibly, dude, sign me up. Even if he doesn't get a touchdown, he's still going to pay off that price tag. So it looks like a spot. This entire game looks like a spot where I'm not going to stack up any of the QBs. It'll just be one-offs. Honestly, it'll probably be mostly Las Vegas with Brock Bowers and Devontae Adams. But it'll just be one-offs. And Thielen's like a good one. He could score 25 points at 5K, and you don't even realize it. Like one touchdown, 100 yards or something like that. So for me, it's really Brock Bowers as a standout. And then Devontae Adams, I don't know why he's 12%, but sign me up. I just don't think it's a stacking game. It just doesn't seem like the volume the stacking for touchdowns is there. It's just a volume game.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what you guys both said about Devontae Adams, Snyder, you especially talking about like single high safety. That is nice. 7,600. It can kind of be a little bit off the wall in terms of like, I don't know. I think he goes overlooked. I think you're at that point, you're like, man, I can just get Justin Jefferson. But dude, I guess we can just kind of forget just how good Devontae Adams is sometimes. Just get him the ball. And that's what they did last week. That was shocking against the Ravens. They bossed the Ravens. You know that you're a Ravens fan and stuff. Like, that was incredible. I got to give the Raiders credit. Like, they go into Baltimore and win that game. They do it by throwing the football. That was impressive to watch. I'm excited to see what they got in store.
There's one quarterback in the NFL that's thrown for 250 plus yards in both games this year. Do you know who that one quarterback is?
It has to be Minshew now.
It's Gardner Minshew.
I never would have guessed that before the season started. Like, that is just incredible stuff. Maybe they are a pass-happy team. I think it's going to regress a little bit more to what we expect. But still, you can get it done against this Panthers team in one half, as we saw the Saints do it, and then we saw the Chargers do it. All right, so Tua Tagovailoa is out this week. He's out for the next 4 weeks minimum. So that leaves us with a Sky. yeah.
That's a different topic, but he should be gone.
We might not see him play football again, but hey, that means we get to watch Skylar Thompson play football. So can Tua please come back? So with this game, Tyreek Hill, you're going to have these Dolphins wide receivers, the lowest owned that you'll ever see them, I think, right? You're not going to have it. Really anyone can get him the ball, but I do think McDaniels can kind of get them into space, kind of maybe unlock their potential still, but it's going to be really hard for them to do so. That's why everyone except A-Chain, who gets the big benefit of no Mostert, and I can't believe this, but last Thursday night game, A-Chain, in the middle of a blowout, they were getting blown out by the Bills. He is playing it deep into the fourth quarter, and he looks amazing. Like, I got to apologize. I was in the Discord hyping up, like, oh, yeah, they're like Omar saying that A-Chain isn't 100%. Omar saying Jalen Wright is the second round. Yeah, A-Chain was up. Looked like Barry Sanders back there, man. He was electric. He was the only good player on that team last week.
We're running the hurry up down big.
Oh my goodness. I was so tilted by that. And like, because I had a lot of Jalen Wright. And you're just like, just let Jalen Wright take the hit. But if A-Chain is going to get that many touches again, $7K feels too cheap. Then on the flip side, we finally got to see a glimpse of Jackson Smith and Jigba getting the football at a high clip last week against the Patriots. Well, he just absolutely went off. I know he had over 122 yards. I mean, from the slot alone, he was very deadly. Also had a touchdown, I believe. DK Metcalf also was great last week against Christian Gonzalez. The one guy I'm selling on the Seahawks, though, I am not buying Charbonnet at 6K. Screw that. I am out. James Cook, yeah, he looked great against them, but James Cook is twice the player of Charbonnet. Drew, tell me a little bit about this one here.
Yeah, it's going to be the same story as last week with Seahawks and Geno Smith, dude. Like, let's see. Jackson Smith Njigba. God, that's a name. It's he had 16 targets last week, and DK Metcalf had 14 or 15. Like, it's amazing, like, between those two. So, like, DK Metcalf is almost like a cross-off. But I do like, just similar to last game, I do like the volume here, but I do like Geno Smith at 5,600. I think there's more TD upside for sure. So Seattle going against Miami. DK Metcalf is still pretty cheap. Jackson Smith is still pretty cheap. So same story as last week. Stack up Seattle. I would stack it up 3 ways. That's at a minimum. I don't know if I can play Charbonnet. I'm with you there. I feel like that's kind of a trap or been a trap all week or all year. But yeah, I do like the Seattle side. I'm going to keep attacking them. But as far as Miami, I think you made a good point as far as like the ownership. Like, people get scared off of like an unknown, not an unknown QB, but like an unknown situation and like how it's going to affect like the studs, especially for a $8,400 Tyreek Hill. But I'm going to be a buyer. I'm going to buy into Tyreek Hill at 8,400. If there's anything that I've learned about, guys coming into the NFL and trying to get their feet wet, it's usually relying on veterans or guys that can get the job done any way they can. And Tyreek Hill's the guy. Like, if it was Kelsey, like in a strong tight end position, it'd be the same deal. You're just going to throw it to the reliable guy. But in this spot for Miami, I think Tyreek Hill is going to get a lot of volume. 8,400, I think he could obviously score a TD or two. and he's going to get a lot of targets. So I'm going to buy actually at 8,400, regardless of Skylar Thompson being the QB. A-Chain, I probably won't do it. He's going to be about 11% owned. It's pretty low considering, where he's been the last 2 weeks, but I just don't think that's where the game script's going to fall. So I think Tyreek Hill is just going to get the majority of the workload, but for me, it's going to be a Seattle stack. Geno Smith, Jackson Smith. I'm not even going to say the last name anymore. It's so tiring. And then DK Metcalf. But it's a great spot. Honestly, Seattle reminds me of Tampa Bay a little bit as far as like at least last year. So I think there's a good stacking possibility Seattle every single week.
Yeah, I am with you there. That double stack looks amazing week in and week out. Just early on in week 2. I mean, it would have just done numbers last week, especially in single entry. Like, look, that price, Snyder. Well, you can get Geno and Jigba and Metcalf, Smith and Jigba and Metcalf. What is that? 18K combined almost. That is incredible. I think it's 18.1 or something like that. No, I'm an idiot. 17.3. 18.3. Oh my goodness, my math is terrible.
It's good. Just say it's good.
No, it's 17.3. I made 2 mistakes.
Oh
anyway, under 18K for that offense, I mean, sign me up all day of the week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you guys on the Geno stacks and tournaments. I think JSN has the nut matchup in this too. Miami struggles against the slot. They have 2 good perimeter cornerbacks, but they really struggle against the slot. I think this is another spot for JSN to eat pretty easily in this one. He'll be one of my higher owned guys, even as one-off. I really like JSN this week. And then on the Dolphins side, I am going to play some a chain, or however you say his name. I think he's going to get steamed up a little bit. I think his ownership will be closer to like 15 or a little higher than that even. I think him with Skylar is actually pretty good. Skylar Thompson targets the running backs at 27% rate, which is even quite a bit higher than Tua. So I think a chain has some huge upside in the pass game work there. So I'm going to be a buyer on a chain this week at 7K flat. I'm only going to play about 7 running backs, maybe 6 or 7, but I'm going to try and get overweight on them. And I think the upside, we all know the upside of a chain there. I mean, the dude can go for 80 in a split second. So I think in both of the games, he's 23 plus points, DK points. So I think he's got a solid floor too if he's going to get 7 or 8 dump offs from Skylar, which is in the full range of outcome, I think, in this game. So I like that. I like even a mini stack with JSN and a chain or something like that. I think I'm going to be out on Charbonnet in tournaments as well. I think he's a cash play if you want to go there, but I can see a lot of outs for him busting this week.
Yeah, the thing about A-Chain is just one of those things where the concern coming into the year was, oh, he's going to split a lot of time with Mostert, right? And that was kind of the concern last year. He's not a true workhorse. Well, sure enough, last week it showed that if he's the only guy who's healthy out there, he's going to play a lot. Oh, I think this ownership skyrockets, Snyder. I think you're right. I think it goes up from 10. I think you could see 20 to 25 because he is incredibly safe on DraftKings, especially. He's also going to be used around the goal line. We saw him score that touchdown last week in Thursday Night Football. I just think there's so many easy ways for him to get there. As long as he is one of the most fragile running backs in the league, it feels. But I gotta say, like, if he doesn't get hurt, it's just he's going to have some of these jet sweeps too, where they just kind of do these touch passes to him. He's going to get 6-7 catches. Like, I know that's a little on the higher side. It's probably going to be more like 4 or 5. I think his props probably 4.5 if I had to guess. He's going to be involved heavily in the pass game, and he's going to be their main runner. And they're going to have to run the ball quite a bit more, maybe with Skylar Thompson being the quarterback. I wonder if they're going to use Skylar Thompson's legs a little bit too. I think that'll be interesting to see what Mike McDaniels has planned. But yeah, I think this game overall, despite a low total, it's not the sexiest game by any means. I could have some pieces. I wouldn't go crazy stacking it up. At the same time, I could see myself running, Smith and Jigba with, A-Chain as a run back, just a real mini stack too. And then if I did want to stack it up fully, you could do 3-4 players from this one. Again, you got to do something gross to win a milli sometimes. And stacking a game in the low 40s is kind of considered gross, but I don't know. I feel like that game could have legs if the Dolphins are able to score. All right, so now this is an interesting one here, Snyder. I set this one up for you because the Cooper Kupp being out, right? Jordan Whittington steps in, plays a really good role, all right? And he's projected for like no ownership at all. I think he's projected for like 5%. I guess it's kind of gone up. You also have the other side of the ball. George Kittle is out. There's a bunch of injuries in this game. Deebo Samuel out. You're going to have extremely heavy chalk with Kyron Williams, Brandon Ayuk, Jordan Mason. All right, and I'm going to bring up a couple others. You also have Demarcus Robinson there. I actually don't love either of the QBs too much. Colby Parkinson is also projected to be fairly chalky as well. You also have Eric Saubert. I'm going to botch that name. I was Saubert or Saubert. Who knows if you pronounce the T at the end. But I could punt a tight end in this spot with no Kittle. Saubert had 2 catches in one of these games that he already played. Snyder, a lot of ownership in this one. Not the highest total, but like the value is here, right?
Yeah, for sure. We've got Ayuk and Mason, probably the 2 higher owned guys on the slate. I think. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with Ayuk yet. I think that San Francisco could get a lead here if they get up by 14. I really don't think Shanahan is going to be trying to run these guys out of the stadium with the amount of injuries they already have. I think if they get a comfortable lead in this, they're going to kind of look to ease it off and kind of pack it in and just get in and out with the W and try and stay healthy. So I'm kind of a little under on some of these guys. I know Ayuk's going to probably be pushing. He's going to push like 40% in like single entry, I think. And Jordan Mason's going to be 40 to 50% and some stuff. I think Jordan Mason is a fine play there. I'm going to keep playing him. I played him in cash both weeks. I played him in single entry both weeks. I'll keep doing that again this week. That's the chalk I'll eat. I think I'm going to be under on Ayuk, though. He's got the upside, though, to just take one pass to the house and pay off that 6,200. So it's definitely a tough fade if you're going to make it. I think he's a great option, one of the best plays on the board, obviously. I'm just not sure how much I'm going to play of him yet. I do like the tight end from San Francisco as well. Like you mentioned, the guy at 2,500, I think he makes a lot of sense, especially with just how bad the tight end position has been as a whole through 2 weeks. If he can get you like 6 points or something for 2.5K, I would take that, I think. And then I'm with you on Whittington play there. I think he's a really good. He stepped right into where Cooper Kupp was in the slot. I think he's a guy that could get 7, 8, 9 targets in this game and pay off that 4,200 price tag rather easily. I was on Tyler Johnson earlier this year. I don't know if I'm going to go back to him. I kind of worry about the Rams' offensive line, too. They got one of the biggest mismatches as the 49ers have the second best defensive line and the Rams have the 26th best offensive line. So I kind of worry about their offensive line a bit, which is going to take me off Kyron Williams.
Yeah, sounds good. When I look at the ownership here, and I think this will be an incredibly popular game for cash games, right? Like I know we're not, talking about cash games or whatever, but like last week you mentioned how a lot of people might have gone 3 Rams even because last week it was Kupp, who else? Parkinson, and then who else in that game? But like, there's a chance that a lot of people are going to be stacking up this one because look, Jordan Mason, yes, he is too cheap here, 6,200. What you're seeing is just a bell cow. He ended up getting the bonus last week. Even in a negative game script, Jordan Mason still got there with ease. He did get the touchdown, which helps. Ayuk with no Deebo, right? 6,200. Like a lot of these guys kind of fit the bill here. Drew, when I look at it, is there a way to leverage any of these high-owned plays? I mean, is Whittington the leverage? I see Jawan Jennings being talked about, but he's more of like a blocking wide receiver. I'm always scared to just play a guy whose role might not change. But I don't know. Is there any leverage plays here?
I think Purdy's the leverage play.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Purdy's at 9.5 or 10%. I think he comes in lower than that.
I agree.
So I think you pair up him with Ayuk. You can obviously keep Mason in those lineups because he's so cheap. This entire game is like you're eating chalk, especially in the afternoon games. I think it helps playing the chalk in this spot. You kind of know where you stand after the 1 p.m. games, and you can pivot if your team suck or just ride out this chalk. So these guys are all in like fantastic spots. But like I was surprised how little Purdy I got, and I think like the field will do the same thing. And they'll get baited into playing other stacks, and they'll play one-offs with Mason or Ayuk or both. But like the Purdy stacks will be missing. And Purdy, had 1 TD last week and scored 18 points. He could easily score 2 or 3 in this type of game script and score 32 points, and no one plays him. He's at like 6% of lineups in the Millie Maker or something. So I do think the way to leverage this chalk is playing the one guy that's almost involved in all like the scoring, which would be Purdy. So that's like the stance that I'm going to take, is probably play a few more Purdy stacks with Mason and Ayuk. As far as the Rams side, I don't know, man. I think they're probably going to be a cross off, even with so many guys being out. Afternoon slate. Obviously, we're not talking about Millie Maker here, but like in the afternoon slate, obviously these guys are all viable. Colby Parkinson makes a lot of sense, but I think in the Millie Maker, there's just too many spots that are really good upside plays. I don't need to punt off this many guys. And I will say Sober is probably the guy that I would play that's super cheap with Kittle being out. I mean, he's 11% or 13%. He could be 20%, and I would probably still play him at 2,500. I mean, it's just like a free square almost in terms of like him playing the Kittle role in a really good Vegas total, like from their perspective. So yeah, that's the leverage spot I would take, is just like, don't be afraid of the chalk and try to get different. Like, just look at the teams that are being built, and they're not with Purdy, they're one-offs. And Sober, is a fine filler as well, because he's so cheap. It's almost like a 3-man stack if you don't even count Sober, because he's so cheap.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing with like Sober, and this is where people are saying, "Oh, tight end sucks this year. Tight end's horrible," right? Like, just punt it. Like last week, if you played Brenton Strange or Luke Farrell from the Jaguars after Evan Ingram got rolled out, you were better than every single one of those cheap chalk tight ends, except for Schoonmaker, I think, right? Situations that, guy being out, especially a guy of George Kittle's caliber, Sober is going to be involved. And the only concern with him is like, well, how much will Juszczyk's role increase? Because it could increase. He could easily play a little bit more of a receiving role. And we have seen that over the first, especially last week. He was involved in the passing game quite a bit. And in week 1 as well against the Jets. I could see that, but I am 100% with you on punting tight end and Sober. I think that's just a really easy click for a main team, especially if you're not spending up a tight end. Because look, we are 10 games in now. No tight end has jumped off the board. Brock Bowers was the one who's closest to it. We haven't gotten to Trey McBride. We haven't gotten to Sam Laporta. But, like, I would rather spend down a tight end this season, especially more so than anything, especially at the start of the year. There's a question about why I play the wide receiver 4 in the Rams. That's Jordan Whittington. He got every single snap after Kupp went down, and he played in the slot over half the time. You want to attack the 49ers kind of in that area. Whittington is great talent, and hook him. All right, so Ravens at the Cowboys. So the Cowboys got embarrassed in their own backyard last week. Or not. Was it in Dallas? Oh, that game was in Dallas. Yeah, that's right. So, Snyder, you made a good point. You were talking about this game before the show. I think you were talking about this total potentially being a little bit slower than you think. But at the same time, we get a Lamar Jackson on a team that is desperate at 0-2. A Lamar Jackson that has been running the ball at a very high clip with very clear stacking options. You know what? I'll talk Mark Andrews up, 4,800, right? You also have a guy like Isaiah Likely at 4,700. There's some stacking options. Zay Flowers, great call last week. Did great job. I think what you're seeing too, I think we were already at 10 targets on the season for Zay Flowers from the slot after a total of 36 last season. So they're moving him around the line of scrimmage a little bit more, which is only going to benefit him. And then on the Cowboys side of the ball, it's CeeDee Lamb and everyone else. I mean, it really is. Jake Ferguson's going to be back from injury for this one. But he is, kind of pricey at 4,500. But I guess that's a fine click here, especially with tight end being so weak. How do you see this one going here, Snyder?
Yeah, I think this game was interesting. Like, I think Tony was talking about it too. I thought this game was going to be close to the 50s in the totals. And you see it's right around 47, 48, 47 and a half. I think at most places, the Ravens are favored by 1 on the road. Lamar Jackson is 20-1 against the NFC. So his back's against the wall here too. So they're going to come out fighting here. I think Lamar is great in tournaments, 7,500. He should be lower owned than Hurts for sure. I think Hurts is going to be potentially 1.5 to 2x his ownership. So I think Lamar's in a good spot there. And then Flowers, last week he had over 20 points. That's 6 of the last 9 games. He scored at least 20 DK points. So I think the Flowers stack is fine. You can throw in Andrews in there if you want. 4,800. I am kind of a little leery on Andrews. He's kind of getting up there in age. He's kind of getting a little dusty, but he can definitely turn back the clock and have a good game for under 5K. I'm not sure what they're gonna do. I know what I would try and do, at least if I was the Baltimore defensive coordinator, is I would just try and put Kyle Hamilton over the top of CeeDee Lamb and try and bracket him, take him out of the game, and then let Dusty Zeke and Dusty Rico and Brandon Cooks try and beat you. But we'll see what they do. From the Dallas side, I think a lot of people are going to play some CD. I've seen his name getting brought up quite a bit. So if he's going to be popular, I'll probably be off of him. But as far as like run backs, like Cooks 5,500, he could catch a deep ball for sure. I'm just kind of going to play like singles, I think, in this game. I think Baltimore wins this game. They've done really well. There was that game against the 49ers last year. Everybody was counting them out. The 49ers were beating everybody. They come into Baltimore as 3-point favorites, I think. And I don't even know if they crossed midfield a couple times in that first half. It'll be interesting to see how this game goes. I think it will be a little slower, though, than most people think, with it being a dome game, Lamar Jackson in the turf. But I think Lamar Flowers is my favorite part of this game.
Yeah, it's well put. I think I read an article where it was like, oh, man, is the Ravens secondary in shambles? You're going to have a 20% owned CeeDee Lamb here, Drew. And a lot of people are talking about CD here. He's going to be fairly chalky in this one. A late game as well. I want your take on this one because we're about to get into the Lions and Cardinals. First, give your take on Lamb in this game. And then talk about construction this week. A lot of the good games are in the late window. Are you going to have a build where, I would say if you're doing a bunch of builds and stuff, where you just completely have a blank slate for the late slate, like you have these last 5 games, you don't play anyone from early and then try and approach the slate that way? Is that something that's viable to do?
Yeah, probably. But New Orleans is at the 1 p.m. slot.
That's true.
Yeah, it's absolutely viable. We've seen that in the past several times, honestly, where especially the chalk pieces, playing one-offs is a different story, but the chalk pieces like a Kamara at 40% or something like that would bust. And you get a couple other pieces like Tampa Bay bust or something like that. And then all of a sudden the guys that have all the afternoon games just sitting there with zeros looking pretty good. And honestly, all these totals are close to 50. So that's certainly viable. And if you want to make a few teams for fun and just wait out the 1 p.m. games and have the afternoon games, I don't hate it. But it's just going to be chalky. I think that's the tougher piece, is I don't know how you get away from all the chalk if you do that. But yeah, CeeDee Lamb at 20% is pretty good. I think if you want to draw a comparison to Justin Jefferson because of the price, I think CeeDee Lamb's in the better spot with the better QB. And then Baltimore, the only guy that I'm really looking at for Baltimore, which is surprising, is Rashad Bateman at 3,800. So if you want to punt off a cheaper guy that's somewhat lower owned, all these guys are pretty low owned, but I just don't think I'm going to play the higher price Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry. It'll just be punting off Rashad Bateman and then playing the CeeDee Lamb side. It's funny, I forget what game last week we talked about. It was similar to this, a really good total, and there really wasn't anybody that jumped off, or you didn't want to stack anything completely. And I feel that way for this one I
think it was the Bengals Chiefs. I think that was the one where a couple pieces did well. Yosef Voss, Rasheed Rice, but no one kind of goes off. I do think that these two teams are a little bit better for that. But yeah, I can kind of get that sense. Let's move on to our last game of the entire slate. The one game with a total in the 50s. The Arizona Cardinals taking on the Detroit Lions. Snyder, despite this total being in the 50s, there's not a single guy above 7% ownership, which is just crazy to me. Yeah. The Arizona Cardinals last week were unowned, right? What you could have done with Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably won you a lot of money if you had him in, especially because you didn't get a single stat after the first quarter. With the Cardinals here, are you kind of going back to that? The Lions are a pass funnel too. Look at the Lions, right? You throw the ball against them. Last week, the Tampa Bay Bucks didn't have to do that because they were in the lead and stuff, but the Detroit Lions are no doubt about it a pass funnel. Kyler Murray, I don't see him being this low owned. I see Kyler Murray being closer to 10% than this 3% projection here. Yeah. I think Trey McBride is going to be fairly popular. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., after that first quarter that he had last week, is going to be fairly popular. I want to stack up the Cardinals. And then on the opposite side, you have Gibbs, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have options and run it back. Is it too pricey? Is that the issue, Snyder? Is that why this isn't getting a ton of buzz, or is it just kind of just going under the radar?
I just don't think the projections are really popping in the models and such. So we got the team. The Lions have the highest implied team total on the slate, and nobody's going to play them. So I'm going to play some golf stuff in tournaments for sure. I'm going to play some golf to St. Brown, golf to JMO there. I think those are both good tournament plays there. I think the Cardinals are due to kind of regress a little bit from last week's outburst. I don't expect them to just go that crazy again. Dan Campbell's going to have these boys ready to roll after what happened last week. He took full blame for that loss, so I think they're going to come out and fight strong for him. Great coach. So I'm going to be looking to back some of these Lions guys here. They're -3 on the road. Great game environment too. So I think Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Jared Goff. Jared Goff's going to be probably 2 or 3% owned maybe. So I'm going to play some of him. And then I've got one stat somewhere on the Lions defense. The Lions offensive line that has the best matchup. They got the second offensive line against the 31st defensive line. So I actually like playing some Gibbs. No one's going to play Gibbs, I don't think. So I'm going to play some Gibbs. I know he's priced up there a little bit, but I'm going to have some Gibbs shares. I think he's going to see probably around 13 carries, and probably he had 7 catches last week. I think he could have 5 or 6 catches again in this game for sure, with upside for a little more. So I'm going to have some Gibbs in the portfolio this week.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I do think those stats matter quite a bit. I mean, this is a game in a dome with a high total. I want to be over on it, Drew. Are you in the same boat? I kind of like Gibbs not having a ton of ownership, but having a lot of upside. It just feels like if the Cardinals are going to be a part of these type of games, where even in week 1 they gave up a lot of points to the Bills, last week they scored a lot of points themselves. They could be a team that just is constantly popping up and optimal lineups.
Yeah, and again, the ownership comes from the way they build lineups and the way the mean projection works. And if Gibbs and Montgomery have a split, then their average might be pretty close, but the games are very variable. I think the guys that stand out to me, I do think this game is worth trying to get into. And I think there's a reason why the ownership looks so low is because of the pricing. Because we talked about, the Seattle stacks are so cheap. And if you look at stacking up Amon-Ra St. Brown with Goff and my favorite Jameson Williams, it's pretty expensive. So yeah, I think it's smart. It's the last game of the slate, or the last game we're talking about, but the last game of the last block of games. We want to stack up the Goff with Jameson Williams with St. Brown. That's where I'm going to go. Arizona, I don't mind Kyler Murray. I feel like the Harrison ownership it doesn't make sense to me. It feels like a trap. I'll go overweight, and then the ownership is basically where I get it at. That's kind of how I feel. Saber has it at 1.5%. There's no way. There's just no way. That's one. I'll take a lot of money for over on that one. But yeah, I do like the Detroit side quite a bit. The Jameson Williams, dude, I think he had 120 yards on 9 targets in week 1. He had 12 targets last week for 80 yards. I just think his ceiling is really high, and St. Brown's ceiling's high. If they both hit a ceiling with Goff, that's the nuts, and it's the last game of the slate. So sign me up. Arizona makes a lot of sense. Kyler Murray with Trey McBride is fine, and then Marvin Harrison is okay. But I think I'm going to stick to the Detroit side, to be honest. I think we went the Arizona side last week. I'm going to go Detroit here.
I like it. That's a good point too. Just regarding about I do think they're going to be way higher owned. I just couldn't believe my eyes when I just over that flagship ownership. Yeah. That's one where I hope it gets adjusted in the morning, just a bit. If not, making your own field lineups is a really fun thing to do. As I say that, as I'm battling college football right now, it could be a little bit of fun. But yeah, I think you guys made great points on that game. Don't think we need to spend too much time, rehearsing your ideas. In my case, regurgitating what you just said. Guys, hit that like button for us, please. Would appreciate that. We're going to get into our plays of the day here. And we have one rule for the Millie Roundtable show if you're new. Got to be under 8% ownership. And, well, I guess we can say anyone from the Detroit Lions and Arizona Cardinals game. We're using SaberSim's flagship ownership feature. So if you say anyone above that, well, you just get scorned, I guess. I think that'd be the word. So I am stalling, so I'm allowing both these guys to look up their percent. But the thing is, when you have a star student like Drew, who's clearly ready, what is the under 8% play? Because Drew, you've been on it the last 2 weeks. You've just immediately snap called my 8%.
Yeah.
Let's see you have an 8% play.
Because I have a list of like 4, but I just
great.
take the first one at the top of my list. I could have stalled a little bit more. I'll tell you what, though. I will go. I don't know if this is what I picked last week, but it's going to be in the same ballpark. It's going to be Mike Evans at 7,200. I just think Tampa Bay has a really good offense for DFS, and it's really been between him and Godwin either way, and I'll take the lower-owned piece of that offense, and Evans is at 6%. Sign me up. I think they both have the same ceiling pretty much. So
you have a type. You have a type for your plays of the day. Tall, bulky wide receivers who can just score.
I just think they have 30-point upside, and
they do. That's never a bad play.
The running backs that have 30-point upside are all chalk, so you can't even play them.
Correct.
You can't even pick them.
Yeah, 6% ownership projected for Mike Evans. Snyder, who is your Millie Maker play of the day?
My Millie Maker play of the day. I'm gonna go with my bold take that I had earlier. I'm going to go with Deonta Foreman as my play of the day. I think he scores more than Cam Akers at a mere percentage of his ownership. So I'm going to go with Foreman as my play of the day.
I like Deonta Foreman. You can catch that on the earlier part of the show. I think it was one of the second games that we talked about being a very solid pivot off a much more chalky Cam Akers. Deonta Foreman out-touching Jerome Ford last week, and that could be a trend to see in the upcoming games. I am going to take the easy route out. That's right. I am taking the low-hanging fruit of the Arizona Cardinals, and I am taking Kyler Murray. He'll come in probably well over 8%. Is that unfair? Should I say Kyler Murray, or should I change that?
I mean, that's pretty unfair. I could have said Jalen Hurts if we're going that route.
Yeah, you're right. I'll change my answer. We'll go right back to it. Rashid Shaheed.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, I wanted to do a late one, but this matchup against the Eagles, the Saints, I'm actually buying into how they're looking. I wasn't a big fan of Dennis Allen coming into the season, but when you look that good through 2 games, despite one of them being against the Panthers, you got to buy some stock. And Rashid, he just has that dog in him, and he's gotten praise all camp. All the first 2 seasons, been getting deep targets, and he runs a lot in slot against the Eagles here, who are weakening in that spot. Very happy with that. So Rashid Shaheed, Deonta Foreman, and then Mike Evans below. Those are the plays of the day, under 8% addition. Again, guys, hit that like button. Thank you all for joining us, for Snyder and for Drew. We hope that if one of us isn't a Millie Maker winner, then we definitely hope it's one of y'all. Bye-bye.